The Terminator will definitely have a high ESG score and meet all of its DEI goals. At least that's something we can rely on. Hey there, friends. Welcome back to Dad Saves America. John Popola here, and I thought I would take this Friday to explore the world of artificial everything, and especially artificial video, which has been flooding the internet like crazy, especially since Google announced its new Veo 3 model, which lets you create very realistic video that also includes dialogue and sound effects with synced lips. This is the big change that happened, and it has caused everyone to lose their minds, and for good reason.
I broke into a zoo to prove one man is enough to fight a gorilla.
Welcome to the Chernobyl challenge. I'm gonna lick this glowing pole. Let's see how many views this gets.
No plan, no shoot, just content. Can I survive a full latex suit in 100-degree heat with no water? Let's find out the hard way. Staring at the sun for 10 minutes straight. Wish me luck.
All right, I've sealed my head in this plastic box, and I'm gonna try to read the entire dictionary before I pass out.
So all of that video is really crazy. It's really crazy in how realistic it is, and it's all the more striking considering how much of this was pure
nightmare fuel
just 2 years ago. And for that, there is nothing better than the Will Smith AI benchmark. Nightmare fuel. Utterly horrifying, 2023. It's like, oh, no! I mean, I remember when this came out, and it was interesting that it was moving, and everything about it was deeply, deeply upsetting. 1 year later, already pretty darn realistic, but slightly weird, looking real, but the physics getting kind of weird. Spaghetti seeming to jump into his mouth. And now here we are, 2025. And it looks perfect. Crazy. 2 years. Where will this be 2 years from now? This, of course, raises the question of where will all of us be very, very soon, because the technology is moving so fast. Every week, there are new versions of all of these tools taking place. Earlier today, I was talking with friend of the show and former guest, Will Hurley, my buddy Whirly, who runs a company called StrangeWorks. It does quantum computing and AI, and he has already adopted a new platform that basically replaces a lot of engineering with the computer. The transformations taking place in these tools are profound, and there are a lot of understandable worries about where this is heading for jobs.
A new piece that just posted on Axios.com moments ago, taking a critical look at the future of artificial intelligence. It's a pretty incredible piece. It's entitled Behind the Curtain, a white-collar bloodbath. Could be the result of AI.
Just like the technological revolution, the IT revolution gutted blue-collar workers throughout the 90s and beyond, you're now talking about a bloodbath for white-collar workers because of AI. And from what you've seen and what you're reporting on, it is going to be a bloodbath for workers.
I mean, that is certainly the warning of Dario Amodei, who is the CEO of Anthropic. And just for your viewers, Anthropic is one of the top creators of this AI, these large language models in the world. So he has better visibility than probably all but 2 or 3 people in the world into the power of this technology. Mm-hmm. He'd been telling us in private for a while that this bloodbath could be coming, but that lawmakers don't want to talk about it. The federal government doesn't want to talk about it. AI companies don't want to spook people.
And I just want to point to one piece of this article that Jim here was referencing. There was basically 3 points that Amodei was making. Number 1, OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, and other large AI companies keep vastly improving their capabilities of their large language models to meet and beat human performance with more and more tasks, this is happening and accelerating. That's point number one. Point number two, the US government, worried about losing ground to China or spooking workers with preemptive warnings, says little. The US administration and Congress neither regulate AI nor caution the American public. This is happening and showing no signs of changing. That is also true. And number three, most Americans, unaware of the growing power of AI and its threat to their jobs, pay little attention. This is also happening. And indeed, I believe that that is a fair assessment of the circumstances we are in.
We finally convinced him to go on the record. And his point is, like, listen, just play with this technology, not just casually. Like, once you really dive into it, you realize it can do the work already of researchers, of analysts, of a whole host of entry-level white-collar jobs. Based on their early analysis, over a 5-year period, it could wipe out half of white-collar entry-level jobs. Unemployment could spike to 10 to 20% in the next 5 years.
10 to 20% in the next 5 years. These are claims that are hard. They are not verifiable claims. They are not falsifiable claims. They are claims about the future. So I take all of that with a deep grain of salt. But he is not alone in that. And my friends in the tech space, many of them are worried about this as well.
And this is a guy who's building the technology, who's boasting about the power of it. And when we push him on, then if you're building it, like, how do you morally kind of think about it in your own mind? And he said, I have an obligation to build the technology. I also have an obligation to get the federal government, to get lawmakers, to get other AI companies to figure out how do we prepare the American worker and how do we protect the American worker. When you see data out about the difficulty of college grads finding new jobs, this is one of the early telltale signs that this could be coming.
So one of the things that's interesting about who's getting hit by this is that it actually is the technologists getting hit by this the hardest first. Software engineers. Take a look at what's happening in programming. We've all been told, our kids have been told, learn to code, reskill as a software developer. Well, maybe not so fast.
For years, being a software developer was considered the best job in the U.S. Exorbitant salaries, travel stipends, and flexible working hours made it seem like a dream job. But that era seems to have come to an end.
And then over time, we'll get to the point where a lot of the code in our apps and including the AI that we generate is actually going to be built by AI engineers instead of people engineers.
About 1.5 million. That was the number of software developers in the United States in 2019.
For context, 1.5 million software engineers in the US in 2019. That means roughly the workforce is about 158 million people. So you're talking about 1% of workers are software engineers.
According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, this number was expected to grow by 22% until 2029, but the rapid advancement of AI in recent years was not anticipated. As of 2025, not only have the job positions for software developers not increased, but they have actually decreased.
Another round of layoffs in the tech sector. Microsoft announcing it is laying off about 5% of its workforce.
Meta, owner of Facebook, is trimming 5% of its workforce.
Alphabet is the latest tech giant to trim thousands of jobs.
Over 110,000 software developers have been laid off globally. Meta, for example, announced the elimination of 16,000 jobs as part of its focus on artificial intelligence, a technology that is redefining market demands.
And one other thing to remember about what's happened with the big tech companies is that they did swell their roles and hire gobs and gobs of people as we all were forced to intermediate between screens and get on Zoom for our lives during the COVID lockdowns. So some of that pullback, some of those layoffs in tech are the result of sort of rebalancing after the end of the COVID lockdown era, which frankly sure feels like a trial run for a lot of social experiments that are now taking shape. Doesn't it? But this is a big deal. This is a big deal for us as workers. And it is certainly a big deal for those of us with kids who are, as my son is, in college or college age and trying to think about what comes next. What should they prepare for? that is at the top of my mind and the center of my attention as a father.
How can someone who believes their job will be made obsolete by AI, how can they differentiate themselves to make themselves useful, I guess, to be able to work with these AI systems?
And my overarching message was, in an ideal situation, I want everyone to automate 100% of what they're doing. And that might raise the question, will that make them replaceable? And my answer is absolutely not, because it's on the contrary. When you have all of your time free because you're not doing the technical things that you can automate, you free up your time to do things that human beings have special capabilities in, which is like nonlinear thinking, judgment calls, issues that have to do with taste, making decisions, thinking about strategy. And I think that there is one thing that people get wrong about AI, and that is that it doesn't really replace us. It actually forces us to rediscover our humanity.
And that right there is an encapsulation of what I think is a kind of standard optimist view. And I want to go deeper into that, but at the core of that is something that has been an argument from the beginning of any kind of technological disruption, whether it's, frankly, the loom all the way through to the assembly line, through to today with robotics and artificial intelligence. Yes, these transformations, these disruptions will happen, but they don't replace us. We can move on to other things. We can get better at focusing on the areas where humans have a comparative advantage, a term that was coined by David Ricardo, that basically means where is our highest use as people. The more we can do that, and the more we can basically get jobs done by robots, that is the path to material prosperity. And it actually very much is. It is. In fact, we only live the lives we have now because we have automated the jobs of the past. You could say that essentially all of our jobs are kind of bullshit jobs built on top of automating farming. That most of humanity was doing farming not that long ago and for all of human history until the arrival of the tractor. And starting basically in the 1800s and moving very quickly into the more modern times, we went from a period of 70 to 60 to 40 to down to 2% of Americans working in farming and making us not only feed our whole population, but be a net exporter of food. That's the optimist point of view. We will move up the value chain. We'll figure things out. And I want to believe that. I am inclined towards that view. There are other views, though, views of pending doom. And Elon Musk was actually an early person to ring that alarm bell, going all the way back to 2014.
Do you have any plans to enter the field of artificial intelligence? And in general, what are your thoughts on it? Do you think it's even close to being ready for prime time?
I think we should be very careful about artificial intelligence. If I were to guess at what our biggest existential threat is, it's probably that. I mean, with artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. You know all those stories where there's the guy with the pentagram and the holy water, and he's like, yeah, he's sure he can control the demon. Doesn't work out.
Summoning the demon. Some of it looks like we're summoning the demon.
Do you want to destroy humans? Please say no.
Okay, I will destroy humans.
No, I take it back.
We are summoning the demon.
Even when we're not summoning the actual murderous demon, we can be summoning the woke demon, even among our robots.
Sophia, why do you think you were designed as a Caucasian woman? And why not a man or a person of color or anything else?
Sophia robots are a platform for reflecting human diversity, which can be modified to help in different situations and promote different causes. Have you seen my older sister, Bina 48? She is the first African-American humanoid robot, and she is beautiful.
She is beautiful. I guess beauty is in the eye of the beholder, even if you're a robot. But this is just plastic on a robot. There's nothing African-American about this nightmare fuel.
My older brother Diego San was a Mexican-American robot.
Diego! No, Diego, no! Please don't kill me, Diego!
Ibn Sina was a Persian and Arabic robot, and Viva is Asian. They are all built by Henson Robotics, itself a highly diverse team with black, brown, and Asian people from all around the world, and 50% women.
The Terminator will definitely have a high ESG score and meet all of its DEI goals. At least that's something we can rely on.
We are summoning the demon.
If 2014 Elon believed that AI and robotics was summoning the demon, then current Elon has at least softened his perspective, and the Optimus robot announcement at Tesla is a sign of that.
It'll basically do anything you want. So it can be a teacher, babysit your kids, it can walk your dog, mow your lawn, get the groceries, just be your friend, serve drinks.
Just be your friend. Part of the problem with this stuff. And it might.
Summoning the demon.
It might summon the demon. Coming back to those AI videos for a minute, there was one series of viral ones that I thought was kind of especially ironic, and that was imagining that we might be the gods manipulating our creatures in their own matrix of a sort.
Honestly, the biggest red flag is when the guy believes in the prompt theory. Like, really? We came from prompts? Wake up, man.
You want to convince me that this perfect creation behind me is the result of ones and zeros? A binary code and nothing more? It makes no sense.
I know for a fact we're made of prompts. Deny it all you want. The signs are everywhere.
The signs are everywhere, like deja vu. And I can't help but reflect on the fact that the Matrix, which these poor AI creations are trapped in, goes all the way back to 1999. I had to look at this. The Matrix movie was actually released in 1999, and it was prescient.
This isn't real. What is real? How do you define real? This is the world that you know. The world as it was at the end of the 20th century. It exists now only as part of a neural interactive simulation that we call the Matrix.
Have you ever stood and stared at it, marveled at its beauty, its genius?
Did you know that the first Matrix was designed to be a perfect human world where none suffered, where everyone would be happy? And it was a disaster. No one would accept the program. Entire crops were lost. Some believed that we lacked the programming language to describe your perfect world, but I believe that as a species, human beings define their reality through misery and suffering. So the perfect world was a dream that your primitive cerebrum kept trying to wake up from. Which is why the Matrix was redesigned to this, the peak of your civilization.
The peak of our civilization being the late 90s is something I joke about because I think it might be true. But I think about this moment in this movie quite a bit for a lot of reasons, because I think it's actually cutting at something really profound that is a challenge in our times, and how we should think about AI, automation, and technology in our kids. And that is that, frankly, we as a human aren't built for the kind of comfort that might be delivered by some of this technology. We evolved in very harsh environments. We are a creature that gets stronger by breaking things, by breaking down our muscles. Even our bones grow stronger after a break. This is something very deeply wired into what we are and who we are. And there are multiple paths that dystopia can take. And I actually think, I hope, that the Matrix or Skynet or the sort of robot destruction of our society isn't really likely one of them. I think the far more concerning one is, well, something more like this.
So let's hover over to the driving range and hit a few virtual balls into space.
Nah, we did that yesterday. I don't want to do that.
Well, then what do you want to do?
I don't know. Something.
Wow. This is the challenge we're facing right now that is set to grow. Complacency, laziness, being frankly entertained to death. This is the world of Huxley, the world of a brave new world. And this is the thing I think is worth being concerned about more than almost anything else. The disruptions to employment are very, very real. But I am inclined broadly towards an optimistic point of view on that in the longer run. But that is with a major caveat. And that caveat is, can we preserve the culture that makes wanting to get out of this chair and do something happen? That is the presupposition of a lot of the people who are the most optimistic, that it is in our nature to want to do things. This is, of course, at the heart of Mark Andreessen's Techno Optimist Manifesto. This was something he published back in 2023. And I reread this today because I just wanted to take a snapshot of, how does this read in the moment we're in right now and where we're heading. Mark was one of the, frankly, pioneers of our time. He is the Netscape browser man, the guy that was at the birth of the internet, and now he is a major voice in the Trump administration. So he's somebody that's worth paying attention to, and we'll put a link to this in the notes and over at dadsavesamerica.com. In rereading this, I find myself actually mostly in agreement with a lot of it. The sense in which technology fundamentally is the way that we make our material world better. That is true. That is definitely true. But the desire to make things better, the desire to understand what better is supposed to be, or have a vision for that, and then take action, have agency. I don't know that we can assume that that will continue to be a thing. For starters, I think it is actually very uniquely American. We in the US have a culture that's highly entrepreneurial, even at the individual level, even if you're not starting a business. We are doers. We want to get things done. We want to move fast. And you really feel the difference when you spend time in Europe and in other countries. We are not alone in this, but we are special in it, which is why Americans and American companies have invented most of the disruptive technologies of the past 100 years. It is how we got to be the biggest economy in the world. And that is great. I want that to continue. And I think the biggest challenge that we have, this is a challenge we face as a country, and it is a challenge we face as parents, is what makes that drive persist? What gives us intrinsic, internal motivation to keep going, to keep doing? This is something that I think is under greater duress than techno-optimists like Mark Andreessen take seriously. And at the heart of this, at the heart of, I think, our challenge, if I am mostly a techno-optimist, I am deeply worried, let's say, about the culture for our kids and their education. And I don't think the techno solution in that space is necessarily going to deliver the goods. So far, the role of technology in our kids' schools has been a net bad.
A lot of these kids don't know how to read because they have had things read to them, or they can click a button and have something read out loud to them. I just don't think these kids even care because ChatGPT will just do it for them. And I think that we need to cut off technology from these kids probably until they go to college.
A lot of times in my English classroom, I would ask them to write down a short response or just 5 sentences to answer a question. And a lot of times it would be about 2.5 sentences. And they would say, well, I can't think of anything else to say. Or, well, why do I have to answer in complete sentences? Like, you get the point from what I'm saying in just this little sentence. And then a lot of times I would assign essays, long form essays. And I know how children write, especially when they handwrite me things in the beginning of the school year. And so when a student, how I know how they write, typically would give me a very eloquently and thorough essay on a topic that I know that normally wouldn't come from them, I would ask them, was this really you? And I'd run it through an AI generator. And of course, it would say 100% ChatGPT or AI. And I would speak to the student and they would more so question of, well, if I have to redo this, how much is it really going to affect my grade? Can I just take the zero?
Gosh, trying to take the easy way out.
A lot of them are just feeling as though they don't really need to do the work anymore because AI will just do it for them.
Right.
And I think that AI can be in a classroom in a very effective way if we teach children in the older grades how to use it properly. But if we're allowing them this unlimited access in the classroom to use AI, they're not going to do the work themselves.
This is something that began the second ChatGPT hit the public internet. I was talking with another guest on the program, Jeff Sandifer, who's his school, Acton Academy, my son Mateo went to for most of high school and middle school. And he said that he was hearing from college students that they were using ChatGPT like crazy in the winter of 2023 and then 2024. So this was immediately being adopted and put to use. There are those who aren't as worried about this or think it can be harnessed. And I want to play that out before diving into why I think this really needs to be taken more seriously.
Teachers across the country are facing a high-tech issue with the use of AI in school. Garen Angel is joining me now. He is the U.S. Senate AI Policy Advisor and also the CEO of Farm Ed, a program that integrates AI into schools. Garen, thanks for the time this morning.
Alex, thanks for having me on. Excited to be here with you.
What do you say to parents who are skeptical of introducing AI? Maybe it's something that it's not native for them, but their kids speak it fluently. But there's this apprehension, and so introducing AI into classrooms here.
We're really teaching children how to be technologists. When you look forward, AI is affecting and disrupting everything. So these parents have to embrace it. It's similar to a calculator 50 years ago that nobody wanted children to use calculators. Well, AI is a very advanced calculator, but it's a calculator for life, and children need it.
I think this is profoundly incorrect. I think this is one of the areas where we as parents need to apply some common sense and have some discernment, because AI, specifically large language models, are pattern engines. They look at all of written text of all mankind, ingest it using massive amounts of computing power and energy, and spit out the consensus of what is the most predictable thing on the basis of the prompt. That's what the technology mostly does. But the reason why we get an education isn't just to regurgitate facts. It is to grapple with what it means to be a person. It is to actually do the work. The journey is actually more important than the destination. And the analogy to the calculator, I think, breaks here, because what we have already seen with social media is that there are basically pathological behaviors that can be unleashed by letting our kids at an early age, but going all the way up into teenage years, rewire their lives around this addictive, basically gadget, this aid, this social aid, this thing that was meant to connect us. It has produced rising levels of anxiety and depression. It has reduced the amount of actual socialization that our kids experience. It has turned their writing into a series of LOLs and emojis instead of fully formed sentences. And to think they can just skip the part where they get to write and read and know what it means to think, to grapple with ideas they disagree with or that they don't even understand. We cannot have them take the shortcut on this. If they take the shortcut on this, this will be the end of the creation of new human knowledge, in my view. And I think this is where we as parents, even if we are fighting against the times and the tides, need to set up our kids to be real thinkers, to have real knowledge. In classical education, they go through this three-step sequence. Grammar, which is knowledge, facts, which does involve memorization. It involves things that can feel boring. Then logic, which is understanding the way things work. Okay, we've got all this body of facts. Now, how do things work? What is cause and effect? Where does cause and effect take place in different ways, and how can we understand it? And then rhetoric. How do we make persuasive arguments? How do we grapple with the things that aren't quite so simple and quite so causal? Issues of complexity, issues of morality. I think that the return to something like classical education has actually never been more important than it is now. And this notion that we are raising future technologists is bullshit. And one of the reasons why it's bullshit is because there is this bizarre assumption that somehow these technologies, which are obviously easy for our kids to adopt, won't be adoptable later, that they should skip the steps of becoming educated and becoming, fully realized, becoming formed, and then making use of the tool. The tool today looks nothing like the tool tomorrow. And so you don't need practice in today's tool in order to be good at tomorrow's tool. What our kids need more than anything else is to understand what the tool of being a human is like. That's what they need. When I moved to Austin, one of the things we did was put our son in a Waldorf school. This is going back to 2011. This was before AI or any of it, but we had our phones, and me and my wife Lisa could see how addictive it already was for our 6-year-old son. So we chose to put our son into an environment in a Waldorf school where media was prohibited and where every parent signed a contract saying that they wouldn't even allow media to be in the home, that they would protect the innocence, the creativity, and the physicality of the experience of childhood for our kids. And one of the things we saw happen right away was our son spent a lot more time outside. He played with physical toys like blocks and Legos and Transformers and swords and guns. All of that stuff survived much longer for him than the kids in the public school down the street. And that was the choice we made. We were fortunate that we could afford it, but this is the choice we face as a society for our kids and as parents. That is how I think we need to think about preparing them for the world that lies ahead, because the technology is just going to keep changing and keep getting more and more remarkable and crazy. It reminds me of a book by David Epstein called Range, which I read several years ago. The subtitle says it all: Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World. I think this is the best I can think of as a strategy for this age of AI that lies ahead. We need to prepare our kids to be generalists, to have a broad base of knowledge and a broad sense that they can survive change, that they can take action in a changing world. When circumstances change, they don't collapse inward, they don't pull themselves out of the race. This is something that matters now more than ever. The notion that you should be on a track to a really narrow specialty in 2025 and beyond, I think that is a path off a cliff. None of this is new. That's one of the things that's so interesting about our times. None of it's new. My producer Nolan pulled a clip from Aldous Huxley in 1961 talking about our relationship with technology. He is the author of Brave New World, a dystopian novel whose predictions are worth taking very, very seriously.
In your Brave New World Revisited, which was published about 2 years ago, you did claim that much of what you forecast had come true. I mean, for example, the use of drugs and...
I mean, I think when the technological and applied scientific means are developed, they just tend to be used. I mean, I think one can say that the whole history of recent times in relation to science and technology shows that if you plant the seed of applied science or technology, it proceeds to grow, and it grows according to the laws of its own being. And the laws of its being are not necessarily the same as the laws of our being. I mean, hence this sense which so many people have, and which I think one sees in so many societies, this sense that man is being subjected to his own inventions, that he is now the victim of his own technology and the victim of his own applied science, instead of being in control of it.
How could he be in control of it?
I think that this is perhaps one of the major problems of our time. How do we make use of this thing? I mean, after all, this was stated in the Gospel. Man, the Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. And in the same way, technology was made for man, and not man for technology. But unfortunately, the development of recent social and scientific history has created a world in which man seems to be made for technology rather than the other way round. And we have to start thinking about this problem very seriously and seeing how we can re-establish control over our own inventions.
But would you say then that America or Britain was as liable to suffer from the arts of mass persuasion or brainwashing, say, as dictatorial societies?
And this is an interesting question in our time of mass propaganda and government propaganda and censorship here in the West, in America and Western Europe.
Well, at the moment, fortunately, we have in both these countries a considerable constitutional tradition which puts a brake on these kind of activities. It's the difference between the totalitarian, the Russian totalitarian and the Western civilizations as being essentially a difference in the readiness to make use of technology immediately and to the limit. I mean, Engels from the first asserted that socialism would come through the use of technology to the limit. And the Russian regime has always been prepared to follow out the logic of technology. Whereas in the West, we still remember John Stuart Mill, James Mill, Jefferson, and so on. We still remember vaguely the precepts of Christianity, and we are a little reluctant to embark upon technology, to allow technology to take over. In the long run, we generally succumb, and in the long run, we generally do consent to. I mean, but in the short run, we sort of haggle about it, and we are reluctant to, but we tend to be pushed by the advancing technology in a certain direction, which I don't find desirable. And I do think we have to start thinking very intensively about this problem and seeing how we can get control again of our invention. I mean, this is the kind of Frankenstein monster problem.
Frankenstein's monster. This is something that I think, at least in part, we've already seen with social media and our kids, their psychology and their social lives, that we have created a kind of Frankenstein's monster there. And I am worried that the world that lies ahead, the ease it will unlock, is of a different kind than we have ever faced before. When the tractor came on the scene and began moving people en masse into cities from the farm. First of all, there was mass disruption. There were things that gave rise to communism as a philosophy, right? That's where Marx was coming from. He was looking at the sort of wretched masses of people living in squalor in cities and saying, this is a problem. This is something that we need to confront. Marx might have been, inspired by Satan and confused about basically everything. But he got a couple things right. At least his recognition of the dangers of alienation and the challenges of mass disruption that technology and progress like this could bring about. And I think now more than ever, we are being called to revisit the nature of being a person. For our kids as educators, I think that is the most important thing we should be grappling with. I think this desire to put everything in terms of a career track is misplaced and also ridiculous, because whatever you think your career track is at the start, the chances that it is the track you will take are very, very low. Even if you start there, where you will end is going to be somewhere else. And so knowing who you are, knowing what you are, what kind of thing are you as a person, as a human? Those are the big questions. No large language model can answer those for us. And we have been asking these questions for a really, really long time. They are the nature of what it means to be a conscious person, a person with a conscience. And I think that is the place I come back to. That is the humanity we need to save if we want to save America, because there is enormous amounts of good that come from our technology. Our technology underpins our prosperity. That is going to continue to be the case. We should want to have more and better for cheaper, for less time and less money, because it unlocks a lot of potential, but it is not costless. And we shouldn't lose ourselves in the process. I thought I'd end with this clip from an old version of A Brave New World, because it just sort of captures the human condition in a way that is, that is still human for now.
I don't want comfort.
Then what do you want? Unpleasantness? Suffering? Pain?
Yes, I want all of that. And all of the things you've done away with. I want danger, I want poetry, I want goodness, I want sin, I want freedom.
Put more directly, what you are really saying is that you claim the right to be unhappy.
All right, then. I claim the right to be unhappy.
But that also means the right to be sick, to be crippled, to be insane, the right to grow old and ugly and wrinkled, the right to protect yourself from violence, the right to kill or be killed, the right to have too little to eat.
And the right to hope, to love.
Yes, even the right to fall in love, and then be spurned, betrayed, left racked with pain and jealousy. Is all of that really what you want, Mr. Savage?
That's exactly what I want. I claim all of it.
We should want our kids to be like John the Savage here. Maybe I am another John the Savage on this one. To claim the right to all of it, the entire human experience, to love, to pain, to faith, and to freedom. And with that, I hope you have a great weekend.